was alone. Wow, a weird first thought to have.
It was arrived upon by a friend of mine who sarcastically suggested I should call the game Thomas Was Alone because that's emo, and emos would like it, and emos post links, which was sarcastic and lame in a weird way, but also actually weirdly right. We found that people were associating the red rectangle at the start of the game with the name Thomas, so giving the game that name immediately started a story going. And that happened in lots of ways throughout the game, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. This is step one, side-to-side movement. If you're a platforming game fan, it should not present too much of a challenge to you, but here it's really just about easing the player into the way the world works, seeing gravity for the first time, understanding how falling feels, and then actually kind of talking about that in the voiceover to kind of have a bit of fun with it. It's also introducing the idea of a narrated story, and it's introducing Thomas, so we hopefully kind of do quite a few things here at the same time. It also does the job of setting up Thomas as an inquisitive character. This is really important, and he becomes inquisitive, he becomes more and more interested by the world and tries to make assumptions about it, and that's kind of what his character is all about, at least at the start.
Thomas decided to start listing his observations for posterity. 1. The whole alone thing. 2. Portals. They led somewhere. He'd yet to work out where. 3. Falling. Thomas was absolutely fantastic at falling. He was almost as good at falling as he was at observing.
Jumping had to be right. It's kind of the main way you interact in this game, obviously. I did a lot of research. I got kind of obsessive about it. It took me... I was still fiddling with the jump physics, I think, about 3 weeks before I launched the game. So it's something that just got fiddled with and fiddled with. It had to feel right. And yeah, there's one problem here, actually, and we'll talk about problems on this as well. I think the biggest issue here was that the speech is a bit misjudged. It takes a little bit long to get through, so most players, when they play the game, have already jumped and are at the exit by the time Danny suggests that they should jump. So I think that's an issue throughout a few of these first levels. So I think going back, I would have done maybe a bit briefer here.
It worked! Thomas had solved the great inverted fall mystery.
This is a challenging jump. So this is a jump where the player can fail at it. So there's a gap, but the whole point of this level is to introduce the idea of jump distance and the fact that you can fall from a jump, but hopefully in kind of a safe environment. So here you can't die, you can't lose. All you're going to do is keep doing it until you succeed. And it's kind of a little bit easier than it looks as well. So hopefully, even if a player gets frustrated and just keeps clicking through it, they will actually eventually succeed. And the voiceover kind of calls attention to that in kind of a fun way as well, just to kind of reiterate that to the player. Uncharted before making this level, and it's kind of inspired by that kind of those kind of scripted moments in games. I didn't do as many in the game as I kind of expected to at the start. There's a few reasons for that, but I guess the main one was that once the players kind of, I played a lot of Uncharted before making this level, and it's kind of inspired by that kind of those kind of scripted moments in games. I didn't do as many in the game as I kind of expected to at the start. There's a few reasons for that, but I guess the main one was that once the players kind of, gets the mechanics in a good enough way, I didn't want to completely kind of overwhelm them with stuff that wasn't as interactive. But here it's cool because it sets up failure for the first time. It sets up what failure looks like. It sets up challenge. I played a lot of Uncharted before making this level, and it's kind of inspired by that kind of those kind of scripted moments in games. I didn't do as many in the game as I kind of expected to at the start. There's a few reasons for that, but I guess the main one was that once the players kind of, gets the mechanics in a good enough way, I didn't want to completely kind of overwhelm them with stuff that wasn't as interactive. But here it's cool because it sets up failure for the first time. It sets up what failure looks like. It sets up challenge, but it's not real. So you can't fail this map unless you run backwards. If you run forwards, the columns don't fall until you've actually left them. Which hopefully kind of does the job of explaining that a little bit better.
This all seemed a little dangerous. The world was not to be trusted. It was unstable, and it seemed to This all seemed a little dangerous. The world was not to be trusted. It was unstable, and it seemed to Thomas that it could let him down at any moment. He was starting to suspect it might even be doing so on purpose. Paranoia.
But it's kind of important, and I know I'm talking a lot about game design introduction. This is by the way, this isn't like innovative in any way. This is Mario. This is every game you ever played. But I think it's kind of interesting to go through the steps. So here, this is a very specific skill. This is jumping up onto steps, but pressing jump and then moving once you've pressed jump. So here, if you just hold down, the direction key and then jump, you're actually going to hit the bottom of a staircase. What you need to do is jump and then in midair move across. And this is just a really subtle, simple level that kind of introduces that as a concept to the player. They don't actually have to do it that much in the main game, but it's useful to just kind of make sure that that's something I know the player can do at this early stage.
Thomas Thomas wondered whether the portals were actually taking him anywhere. He felt like he was making progress, but there wasn't really any way to know. He seemed to be moving predominantly up and to the right, which might, or might not, be important.
So kind of we're extrapolating on precision. It's essentially we've done it in the previous level. We've made you do it, and here we're kind of queuing up a few of those. So if you fail at one, you can actually force yourself to go back a couple of steps in the progress. This is kind of the first time we're challenging the player, which is important, but it's important as well that it's not overwhelming. It's still very early days. I haven't yet shown you the kind of the differentiating mechanic of Thomas. So it's again just kind of bringing players up to speed with stuff and starting to show them how a game would work in this space. I didn't add respawning to the game until about a month before release. It's a classic example of something that every playtest I ever did. So basically, if you died in the game previous to a month before it came out, you were basically reset the level. So it didn't matter how much progress you'd made, you'd reset the level to the very start of the level, all your characters back where they started. Which means that you could, if you died late on in a level, lose about 5 minutes of gameplay. This was not good. And the playtesters told me at length in capital letters that it wasn't good in emails. But what I tried to do, what I realised was it was very hard to do, but I worked out about a month before release how to do it, and went back and added all these respawner points. And I'm so glad I did. If I hadn't done that, I think the game would have got very, 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 very tedious instead of its current level of kind of reasonable tediousness. It's also the reason why I think the game, sometimes people feel the game might be a little bit too easy, because I built the levels with that kind of failure in mind. So as you go through most of the levels in Thomas, they actually get easier as they go on, because I didn't want players to get frustrated. So I think that might be something I should make sure that I have the respawning system planned more than a month before release next time.
Something about the boiling, toxic, glowing water intimidated Thomas. He didn't like it. He certainly didn't want to swim in it. He made another mental note. 4. Water. Not good. To be avoided.
Weird one, the lighting. I didn't have lighting at one stage. There wasn't light. Then it was sounding a bit biblical. But as it went on, I kind of added that in. Initially, I was doing them by hand for every level, and basically this procedural system kind of came out of laziness. I didn't want to do that anymore. And weirdly, as a side effect of that, it was cool, and the shadows moved and could be kind of related to placement of objects, placement of characters. And it was good. It's actually faked, because the game was made in free Unity. I didn't have any shadows within the game kind of proper. So what I did was they're kind of stretched rectangles. So I place a corner of the rectangle at each corner which the shadow is projecting from, and then kind of stretch them off into the distance. Any coder listening to this just lost all respect for me, because that's the most wasteful way you could possibly do this. But it kind of worked, and we just went with it. And it's one of the things that people seem to like. So, yeah. Fortunately, it's rectangles, so I can be wasteful. Lighting.
The loneliness was getting to Thomas. No amount of observation or obsessive note-taking could combat that.
This is the moving platform corridor. This was an attempt to bring in something that's going to become very important in a very short amount of time, the moving platforms. It's really hard to introduce moving platforms because moving platforms move, and that makes them challenging and makes them a kind of a complex interaction. So what the corridor here allows me to do is introduce you to the idea that sometimes the ground moves, but in a way that doesn't actually kind of impact you too much, and won't cause you, hopefully, to get too stressed out. People seem to like it. It's kind of a bouncy castle level. People tend to have fun as they move through it, which is quite cool. And yeah, it looks interesting, and hopefully it just kind of introduces the concept.
Thomas had a new theory. The world was training him. He could feel himself getting smarter. There was the mental list to consider. Over the minutes and seconds since his spontaneous generation, he'd become a pretty skilled jumper. He was evolving. He just wished he had someone to share it with.
People seem to like it. It's kind of a bouncy castle level. People tend to... This is the most important level in the game. This is the point where I basically get to the point. And arguably I should have done it a little bit sooner. However, this is where it is, and that's fine. So this is the point where the player has to learn how to switch characters, which is kind of the basis of the entire thing, is this switching between the characters. This is also actually one of the first levels. This is almost identical to the version that was in the original Flash game. You have two characters, both on the wrong side with their alternating targets. It's hopefully a space that makes a lot of sense. Kind of logically you can understand what's going on with it. There's no lighting that's complex in it. It's quite flat. It's intentionally, hopefully, everything about this level is designed to get out of your way so you can learn essentially, a few things. One, how to switch characters, obviously. Two, how to, the targets. The targets are specific to the character. And three, the difference in abilities, so you should work out that Chris needs help. If I can get those 3 lessons to you, and if you've completed the level, then you've learned all those lessons, the rest of the game becomes much, much more achievable.
Chris took an immediate and deep dislike to the skinny red rectangle. Who the hell did this Thomas think he was?
This was a weird little accident, this level, actually. There's on Thomas on the right there. As you move up, you're moving through trigger boxes. If you don't make games, trigger boxes are basically spaces you jump into or move into, and they cause something in the game to happen. So as you move up as Thomas, you're hitting these trigger boxes which cause the walls to come in. But as a really weird coincidence, I got one of the timings wrong, so that as you moved up, there's a certain point where it looks like you can jump somewhere, you jump to it, and the wall flies out and hits you in the face. It's kind of a funny moment. And I did it, and I thought it was funny, and it felt kind of organic. And I took it to, when I started showing the game to people, it happened to everyone. It's a weird thing that it seems to catch everyone out. Even though there's nothing forcing you into it, 90% of the time people get hit in the face. And most of the time they laugh, so I left it in, and I'm really happy with it, actually. It's one of those nice little coincidences that worked out really well.
Chris had been doing fine. He wasn't the highest jumper, but he'd held his own. He'd even been graceful at times. Well, not actually. Not technically graceful, it's probably the wrong word, but, fine. There was that skinny little runt leaping about like he owned the place.
everyone loved the steps. They didn't actually, and it's probably my biggest design regret in the game is steps. Basically, are kind of obstacles that you have to jump over by kind of piling up a few characters in order to get through. That's fine. The problem with steps is that you have to do that repeatedly. That you have to essentially solve the same puzzle over and over again in a sequence, and there's just 2 or 3 too many times I do that in the whole game, and it's frustrating to players. Yeah, it sucks. I went through and I removed quite a few of them. So if you're annoyed, you would have been more annoyed if I'd left it how it was. So yeah, it's a shame. I think there's some which are more acceptable than others. But yeah, if that's the worst bit of design in the game, I'm pretty happy though. So yeah, lesson learned.
Great. Another chance for Thomas to jump slightly higher than Chris. How fortunate. Seriously, this made the whole switch pressing thing entirely worthwhile.
Steps.
Okay, this was more like it. A glowy white thing. Only Chris could get to it, which of course made it all the more enticing. What would it do? What new opportunity might this switch open up to him? Great. Another chance for Thomas to jump slightly higher than Chris. How fortunate. Seriously, this made the whole switch pressing thing entirely worthwhile.
Yeah, this level's a great example of how useful playtesting is. This map was always very similar to this, but there was one major kind of design difference, was that the stepping stones at the bottom of the screen had a wall, had no wall below them, so they were floating over water, which meant that you could fail about 8 or 9 times here, causing you to get very frustrated and angry. And it wasn't a soft fail where your character fell through and you got back up and carried on. It was a cruel, harsh fail that reset the level. And my playtesters hated it. So this is a great example of the kind of thing that to me was invisible, because I understood how the characters moved and I was, making them and playing them all the time. To me, it was a really easy sequence of stepping stones that you can get through first time every time. But once I put it in front of playtesters, I got emails from people saying it was taking them like 45 minutes to get through this level because of that problem. So just sticking a wall underneath, I kept the water because it looked nice, but the sticking a wall underneath really kind of helped and just smoothed people through. People are still working out the game at this stage, and I don't want to kick them too much in the face. I've already hit them in the face with a wall.
Was this good? Because on the surface, it did not seem good. Chris was pretty scared. Little Red seemed fine, happy to be on his merry little adventure. Chris couldn't shake the feeling that things had taken a significant turn for the worse since Thomas had joined him. Sure, he'd been able to piggyback his way to ever so slightly higher platforms, but where had that got him? Well, to ever so slightly higher platforms, which was sort of his point.
Danny a little bit sooner. Danny really, well, I should have mentioned Danny a little bit sooner. He just does so much. It's a long story that I've told lots of places, but basically I wrote the story for him. I was trying to find a voice that would suit the game, and I was a big fan of his writing and his kind of audiobooks and radio stuff and all the things he does. And I wrote the part kind of with his voice in mind. And then I tried to find people who could do it, and no one could do it. And then I got drunk and emailed him, and he said yes, which was a bit of a shock. So I'm really chuffed. He did an awesome job. He's been really cool with the game. He's talked about it. He's been lovely, and he's just a really nice chap. He's also really fast. I'm recording this after recording some other stuff with Danny, and he's amazingly quick at what he does. I'm doing a much worse job, and the people in the booth are getting bored, I imagine, at this point.
Chris stared at Thomas with pure hatred. He seemed so very happy at their situation. Friends together, a brave fellowship of quadrilaterals on a quest for greatness. That would be fine. But it was all the obvious observation that Thomas was doing which grated. Every time they saw something vaguely new, Chris would hear a satisfied little from the vaulting idiot. He hoped the next portal would split them up, if only for a few levels. John knew. He knew that this was his chance, a moment to shine. This was game day.
I really like John. John's my favourite character. Well, I'm going to say that a few times because I've got quite a few favourite characters, but John I really in particular like. He's insecure in a weird way. I'm not entirely sure why he is, but he is. And that leads him to kind of be dishonest and narcissistic, which I think a large number of creative people will associate with. I know I do. And he's so he's a really interesting character. I like the way he grows. I like that his journey as he goes on, and I like the way that his power of kind of basically being the highest jumper is usurped later on by Sarah, and what that does to his view on his situation. So he's a very cool character. This is another level actually from the original Flash game, which obviously I tweaked and kind of brought across. I really liked the idea of confined spaces as applied to this game, because with large spaces, having multiple characters with different abilities kind of hopefully feels kind of empowering, feels like you can do anything and get anywhere. Putting them into a confined space kind of becomes an interesting kind of jumble. They get in each other's way, they trip over each other. There's a nice little bit of narration here that kind of highlights that stuff. But it was just something really cool to play with. The other thing is, and I do this all over the place in this game, is I really love adding a character who has a specific ability and then not letting you use it for a little while. But specifically because I just think it builds anticipation. John can jump really high. You've seen that, and to then put him in a space where you can't play with that button is just kind of hopefully kind of intriguing and frustrating, and you want to pull through. And you're kind of with John in this level. John is angered by his situation. He just wants to be free. So hopefully kind of the player aligns at that point with John.
This would not do. John needed room to show off his exceptional skills. As it was, he was trapped on the wrong side of these little dot things. Where did they come from, anyway?
The other thing is, and I do this level exists.
John inhaled the air of the open space, and it smelled of awesome. Time to flex those muscles, to put his training to use, time to show those little dots how it was done.
This level exists solely to allow the player to feel their way into John. This is a chance for you to basically make him jump properly for the first time, and hopefully because of the constraints in the last level, that feels awesome. And I actually use the word awesome in the narration just to push you in case that's not how you're feeling. You should, it's a very good game. And then, yeah, so you've now got access to this awesome jump, and you can do what you feel.
John decided to press the switch to let the little dots catch up with him. John cared for his new allies. You could tell from the sympathetic expression he practiced in the mirror all these years. John was happy to keep helping. He felt it was important to his image that he was seen to help the little guys.
I think this is the this is getting very self-deprecating, but I think this is the weakest level in the game. I came very, very close to cutting it. This is where the staircase repetition kind of becomes, well, boring. I did do a lot. I shifted things around, kind of varied the step sizes and gaps, and to add variety. But it's a lot better than it was. But it was not. It's the one that when I'm watching Let's Plays, and I'll talk a bit more about Let's Plays in a bit. But the way it's kind of the one that I fast forward through on the Let's Plays because I find it very, very slow. I don't know. That might just be over familiarity, but I don't like this level. Have fun with it though, and I'll see you on the next one.
To keep helping. He felt it was important to his image that he was seen to help the little guys. He didn't mind them so much either. The red one, Thomas, had a charming way of applauding every time John jumped. The angry orange one was less immediately likeable, but his unremitting cynicism and tutting amused John. John was happy to keep helping. He felt it was important to his image that he was seen to help the little guys. He didn't mind them so much either. The red one, Thomas, had a charming way of applauding every time John jumped. The angry orange one was less immediately likeable, but his unremitting cynicism and tutting amused John. This was interesting. A floating target. This would require coordination, balance, and timing. John was sure the dots would be lost, but he was happy to guide them to triumph. Maybe that's what the dots were for. They were there to extend John's reach, to make his performance even more impressive. John liked the thought. He decided to keep them.
So this is the last. This is actually the last level of the demo. So it's kind of important for that reason. But the kind of the big design lesson here, and you'll notice I guess like the lessons are slowing down at this point. But the big lesson here is that there's a temporary portal success. So previously all the portals have sat on a static ground. So you queue someone up, you queue someone up, you queue someone up. With this one, you have to finish this level by having Thomas falling through that portal. And it's hopefully it's kind of safe. If you miss your timing or you get him through early, you can always catch back up with yourself. So it doesn't punish you if you don't get it immediately. But it's something I really wanted to do later on, and there's quite a few places where I play with this idea. So yeah, it's that basically. It's a way of introducing that, and hopefully kind of hints at the possibilities if you're playing the demo of kind of where the game can continue on from there.
So, this was how Claire would die. She knew it would happen eventually. She was rubbish at jumping, and she moved slowly. She felt a little like her continued existence was breaking some kind of natural order. The crumbling pillar was a dramatic death, she supposed. Wait, what? Claire couldn't shake the feeling that she was not, in fact, dead. It was at that moment that Claire realised she had superpowers. She'd need a cape, but there was no getting around that. You couldn't be a superhero without a cape. Claire didn't want confusion. If you saw a cape, that made matters clear. You knew what you were dealing with. Claire was all about communication. And, you know, floating in water, which was her superpower. Fear not, my skinny friends, for I am Claire, and I will save you. Claire needed to come up with a superhero name as soon as possible. Claire was rubbish. Claire arrived just in time, which was, of course, the perfect moment for superheroes to arrive. Claire arrived just in time, which was, of course, the perfect moment for superheroes to arrive. Claire arrived just in time, which was, of course, the perfect moment for superheroes to arrive. As the water began to rise, Claire vowed to save this little rectangle in as many restarts as it took. Claire wondered if Thomas would make a good sidekick. Or was she more the lone Avenger type? She'd like that. The sole hero in a world of rectangles and conveniently placed pools of toxic water. Told Claire that staircases were a bit of a fixture here. Claire wondered why the world made it so difficult. Probably needed a nemesis, a villain who would show their true colours at the worst possible moment, hurting all she held dear. Chris was the most obvious choice. He seemed stroppy enough, and his jump was so pathetic that it conveniently avoided Claire's insecurities. Yes, Chris. Diabolical Chris. The fiendish Christopher. Where's Chris gone? Was he off somewhere? Plotting Claire's downfall? If Claire was honest, and she had to be because she was a superhero, this was a troubling turn of events. Still, there were reasonably sized bodies of water to cross. Platforms over water, eh? Claire's newly heightened senses told her that there were multiple paths across with various possible configurations of the little posse. Doing really well. Claire hoped she could get them all across. John was fully aware he could do this alone. Thomas hoped he'd never have to. Claire was alone, which was odd, because she wasn't meant to be alone. She needed to be where there were rectangles to save. Being the only superhero in a given space kind of defeats the object. Spikes? That was new. Claire avoided them. She decided they were most likely her kryptonite. Not the rubbish red kryptonite either, the proper radioactive green stuff. Wow. Deja vu. The world was repeating. And this time Thomas was here. Claire felt something had gone wrong. There was a disturbance in the force. Something had altered the matrix. The world was reacting to their progress. It was amassing its forces. It was plotting against them. Claire finally had a nemesis.